I have to ask the question, is it really a form of neocolonialism to insist that every person in every country on this planet is entitled to human rights? I think not. Like many of you, I was involved in the anti-apartheid movement. This was an international solidarity movement based on the principles of universal human rights. The conclusion that black and other non-white South Africans had a right to fundamentally equal treatment, and that the cultural traditions of Afrikaner racism, of the white minority in South Africa, could not be used to trump the principle of universal race equality. We were not seeking to impose Western values on South Africa. We were supporting non-white South Africans and their white allies struggling for justice, freedom and equality. How curious it is that the very people who praised the anti-apartheid movement and were involved in it never said it was an attempt to impose Western values on South Africa, but they often say the same thing when we support the struggle of workers in Iran, or women in Iran, or ethnic minorities in Iran, or gay people in Iran, or religious minorities in Iran who suffer persecution. That's Western imperialism. You're just neocon lapdogs. These same people never said the same thing when we and they fought together to support the anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa. I think the idea that we have to somehow kowtow to or subordinate our values to reactionary elites, either here in this country or around the world, is a nonsense. You know, the fact that different countries have different histories and traditions cannot be allowed to pull the teeth when it comes to defending human rights. We need to uphold values like the rights of women and gay people, and we need to resist the fear that we will be denounced as proponents of a new form of imperialism. We need to say loud and clear that these human rights are universal, that the people who wrote the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights were not just white Westerners, they were contributors from all across the world, from many different cultures and traditions. It was their common consensus, agreed by all the nations of the world who are members of the United Nations, that they will defend and uphold these values everywhere. Not somewhere, not sometimes, but everywhere, all times. We're simply asking the nations of the world who've signed that declaration to honour their pledge and honour their commitment. So back to the question, is multiculturalism still a progressive force for the upliftment of suppressed peoples? Or has it become a Trojan horse for the violation of human dignity in the name of defending cultural tradition? Perhaps, of course, it's a bit of both. That's why I continue to defend multiculturalism, but with the following very important qualification. Multiculturalism is a positive ethos, a real major advance in human evolution, providing it does not promote values and practices that violate human rights and sustain prejudice, injustice, and suffering. I'd say that a good and beneficial society is one in which all citizens have the freedom to pursue their own different values or practices in private, while in the public sphere, all citizens are treated as equals under the law and are bound together by a shared commitment to universal human rights, regardless of the differences in their personal morality and private lives. In other words, Christian fundamentalists should be free in their own home to practice their beliefs. If they believe that homosexuality is wrong, they are quite entitled to hold that belief, and they're quite entitled to abstain from same-sex relations. Christian husbands and wives who believe in a strict male-female gender division of labour in the home should be allowed to lead their domestic lives accordingly. Why not? But what they don't have is the right to demand that their homophobic, patriarchal interpretation of holy text should become the law of the land and be imposed upon everyone else. That's where we have to draw the line. Where multiculturalism has sometimes gone off the rails is in its institutionalization of difference in the public sphere through initiatives like the state funding of faith schools. I'll make it very clear that I am totally opposed to any state funding of Church of England or Catholic schools as much as Hindu, Muslim or Jewish ones. Faith schools factionalize education along religious lines. Another big error has been to bow to demands for cultural sensitivity, permitting some communities to be exempt from the norms of universal human rights when it comes to issues like forced marriages or arranged marriages and incitements to homophobic violence. If an arranged marriage is genuinely freely entered into and consented by the parties, no problem. But so often it's not. The prospective bride and groom are under great family, community and social pressure. Same when it comes to incitement to homophobic hatred or violence. We can accept criticism of homosexuality. That's valid in a free society, but not when it strays into the area of inciting violence. I would sum it up like this. All peoples possess a culture, but this does not mean that all cultures are equally virtuous. There are certain laws, art forms, political systems and technologies that are inferior, and we must not be afraid to say so. We've got to have the confidence to say that some things are better than others. In particular, we have to say, and believe it, that some values and ideas are better than others. The Enlightenment was better than the Dark Ages. Freedom is better than slavery. Democracy is better than fascism. Scientific knowledge is better than superstition. And future civilizations will no doubt be far better than our own. While all human beings deserve respect, not all beliefs and traditions should be respected. Political and religious ideas based on racism, patriarchy, and homophobia are unworthy of respect. They need to be challenged, not tolerated. They need to be challenged, not indulged. We should never let the good principle of respect for diversity and other cultures to stray into a situation where we end up colluding with human rights abuses. Thank you.